It's funny, the things you remember when your world falls apart. It's never the big speeches or the dramatic arguments. For me, it was the smell of rain, the way it clung to the air that afternoon, fresh and clean, a promise of renewal. I was in the kitchen, making a pie, an apple pie, with a crumb topping, the way my son David has loved it since he was a boy. My hands were dusted with flour, and I was humming an old tune, one my mother used to sing. I felt content. It's a simple word, but it's a precious feeling, one you don't truly appreciate until it's gone. That feeling lasted until I heard the car pull into the driveway. Not David's familiar, rumbling engine, but the smooth, electric purr of my daughter-in-law, Chloe's car. It was early for her to be home. A little knot of curiosity tightened in my stomach, but I brushed it off. Maybe she forgot something. Maybe she wasn't feeling well. I wiped my hands on my apron and turned towards the hallway just as the front door opened. And there she was, Chloe. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, not a strand out of place from the morning. She held her leather work bag in one hand, and in the other, she held my grandson, Leo's, small backpack. Leo himself was clinging to her coat, his little face buried in her coat. He was only 4 years old. "Chloe?" I said, my voice laced with that simple, grandmotherly concern. "Is everything all right? Is Leo okay?" She didn't answer me right away. She looked different. Her face, usually so carefully composed, was like a mask of calm, but her eyes were like chips of ice. She looked at me, and then her gaze swept past me, through the kitchen, the living room, as if she were appraising a property, as if she were a stranger. "Leo, sweetheart," she said, her voice unnaturally bright. "Why don't you go up to your room and play with your new fire truck? Mommy needs to talk to Grandma." Leo peeked out from behind her coat. His big, brown eyes, David's eyes, met mine. He gave me a tiny, uncertain smile. My heart gave its usual, joyful little leap at the sight of him. "Go on, baby," I said softly, trying to sound reassuring. He scampered off, his little footsteps echoing on the stairs. And then it was just the two of us. The only sound was the gentle hum of the refrigerator and the distant, rhythmic thump, thump, thump of Leo's fire truck upstairs. Chloe placed her bag and Leo's backpack on the hallway table with a deliberate slowness. She smoothed down her already smooth skirt. Then she finally looked at me. "Martha," she began. And I knew, right then, the way she said my name. Not Mom, as she had for the past 6 years. Not even the warmer Martha she used when we were joking. It was cold, formal, a statement of distance. "We need to talk about Leo." I felt a chill, despite the warmth of the kitchen. "What about Leo? Is he sick? Did something happen at school?" A small, tight smile touched her lips. It didn't reach her eyes. "No, nothing like that. He's fine. It's about his upbringing, his environment." I must have looked completely bewildered. "His environment? Chloe, what are you talking about? This house is his home." "Is it?" she asked, and her voice was dangerously quiet. "David and we've been talking a lot. We feel that Leo is becoming too attached, too dependent." I felt the floor tilt slightly beneath my feet. I reached out, my floury hand landing on the cool granite of the kitchen counter to steady myself. "Too attached? To his grandmother? He's 4 years old, Chloe. That's what children do. They love." "It's more than that, Martha," she said, her tone sharpening. "It's the sweets you give him when we've said no sugar. It's the old-fashioned stories you tell him. It's the way you undermine our rules. You're creating a split loyalty. You're confusing him." Each word felt like a small, sharp slap. I never, ever intended to undermine them. I was just being a grandma. I was the soft place to fall, the keeper of cookies and silly songs. I thought that was my role. I thought it was a good role. I never meant to, I stammered, my throat tight. I know you didn't, she said, and for a fleeting second, there was something else in her voice. Not sympathy, but maybe pity. It was gone as quickly as it came. But intention and impact are two different things. David and I have decided that for Leo's own good, he needs a more structured environment, a more consistent parenting model. The knot in my stomach was a hard, cold stone now. What does that mean, Chloe? She took a deep breath as if she'd rehearsed this. It means we've enrolled him in a new preschool, a fantastic private academy. It has an extended day program. It means he won't be spending his afternoons with you anymore. The air left my lungs. Just left. I couldn't breathe. The world seemed to shrink to the space between us, to the determined set of her jaw and the cold finality in her eyes.
You're taking him away from me? The words were a whisper, torn from some deep, wounded place inside me. We're doing what's best for our son, she corrected, her voice firm. This isn't about you, Martha. This is about Leo. We feel it's time for you to take a step back, a big step back. I looked at her, this woman I had welcomed into my family with open arms. I remembered her on her wedding day, beaming, calling me Mom for the first time and hugging me so tightly. I remembered her, tired and radiant, placing a newborn Leo in my arms. "Meet your grandson, Grandma," she'd said. And now, this. The thump, thump, thump from upstairs stopped. Silence descended on the house, a heavy, suffocating silence. I looked at the pie on the counter. The apples, neatly sliced, the cinnamon. It all seemed so foolish now, a pointless ritual for a life that was already over. That was the day. The day the rain fell outside, but the drought began in my heart. The day my daughter-in-law didn't just take my grandson away, she stole my sunshine. To understand the depth of that cut, you have to understand what my family meant to me. My whole world, for as long as I could remember, was built around them. My name is Martha. I've lived in this same town, in this same house, for 42 years. I raised my son, David, within these walls, the walls that heard his first cries, his first steps, his laughter, his teenage grumbles. His father, my Michael, passed away when David was only 10. A sudden heart attack. 1 minute he was here, a vibrant, laughing man, and the next he was a memory. The silence he left behind was a physical presence in this house. For a long time, it was just David and me against the world. We were a team. We ate our meals at this kitchen table. We did homework here. We celebrated birthdays, mourned goldfish, and dreamed of futures here. This house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was my anchor. It was the keeper of all our stories. When David met Chloe, I was so happy for him. He brought her home for dinner, and I saw the way he looked at her. It was the same way his father used to look at me, like she hung the moon and the stars. Chloe was beautiful, smart, ambitious. She came from a different world than ours, a world of corporate jobs and city apartments. But she seemed to love David so much, and she was polite, always bringing me flowers or a nice candle. I wanted so badly to be a good mother-in-law. I'd heard the horror stories. I promised myself I would never be one of those. I gave them space. I never dropped by unannounced. When they got married, I gave them my blessing and my joy, wholehearted and true. And when Chloe got pregnant, I was over the moon. I offered to help paint the nursery, but they had a designer. I offered to babysit, but they had a detailed schedule. I learned to hold back, to offer instead of insist. It was a delicate dance, but I was willing to learn the steps just to be near them. The day Leo was born, the day Leo was born, it was like the sun broke through after a long, long winter. They placed that tiny, swaddled baby in my arms, and I felt a piece of my own heart, a piece of Michael's soul settle right into mine. He had David's eyes and a little tuft of blonde hair, just like Chloe. In those early days, they needed me. Chloe was exhausted, recovering from a difficult delivery. David was overwhelmed with a new job. I moved in for 2 weeks. I cooked, I cleaned, I did the laundry. I would take Leo in the quiet hours of the night so they could sleep, just rocking him in the old chair in the nursery, singing the same lullabies I'd sung to David. Chloe would sometimes watch us, her eyes full of a tired gratitude. "I don't know what we'd do without you, Martha," she'd say, and I'd just smile and say, "This is what I'm here for, my dear. This is what grandmothers are for." As Leo grew, our bond deepened. When he started to talk, his first word, after Mama and Dada, was Gaga. That was me. Gaga. It was the most beautiful name I'd ever been called. Our afternoons together became our sacred ritual. David and Chloe both worked long hours, so I would pick Leo up from his preschool. We'd come back here, to this house. We'd have a snack. Yes, sometimes it was a cookie, I admit it. Then we'd play. We'd build forts out of blankets in the living room. We'd dig in the garden, his small hands next to my wrinkled ones, planting flowers. We'd read books. Not just any books, but the old, worn-out books from David's childhood. The Very Hungry Caterpillar, Goodnight Moon. I was building a world for him, a world of magic and simplicity, a world I thought was safe. I saw the little changes, of course. As Chloe's career advanced, she became more particular, more focused on the right way to do things. The right schools, the right activities, the right organic foods. She bought Leo educational toys made of sustainable wood. She talked about cognitive development and emotional intelligence. My simple, old-fashioned ways of loving him began to feel inadequate, quaint. Sometimes I'd catch a look on her face when I gave Leo a second cookie, a slight tightening around her mouth, a barely perceptible shake of her head. She'd say things like, "We're trying to limit his sugar intake," or "That cartoon is a bit too stimulating for him before bed." I would always apologize. I would try to do better, to fit into their new modern world. I didn't want to cause trouble. I just wanted to be Leo's Gaga. I thought we had an understanding, a silent agreement that even if our methods were different, our love for that little boy was the same. I was wrong. The first real crack appeared on Leo's 4th birthday. It was a Saturday. I had spent the whole week preparing. I'd sewn him a cape, a superhero cape, because he was obsessed with firefighters. I'd baked and decorated a cake in the shape of a fire truck. It was lopsided, and the red icing had run a little, but it was made with love. I was so proud of it. The party was at their house. It was a beautiful, modern home on the other side of town. Everything was sleek and minimalist. When I walked in with my lopsided cake, it looked out of place, like a messy, colorful weed in a perfectly manicured garden. Chloe had hired a professional party planner. There was a bouncy castle in the backyard, a magician, and a caterer serving miniature, sugar-free, gluten-free cupcakes for the children. They were perfectly symmetrical. I set my cake down on the table next to the perfect cupcakes. It looked even more lopsided by comparison. Leo saw it, though. His eyes lit up. "Gaga! A fire truck!" He ran over and threw his arms around my legs. That was all the validation I needed. Later, during cake time, Chloe announced it was time for dessert. She started handing out the perfect little cupcakes to the children. "What about Gaga's cake?" Leo asked, his little voice piping up. Chloe smiled, but it was a tight smile. "We'll have that later, sweetie. At home." "But I want Gaga's cake now," Leo insisted, his lower lip starting to tremble. The other parents were watching. I felt my cheeks grow warm. "Leo," Chloe said, her voice losing its playful edge, "we're having the cupcakes now. Gaga's cake can be for a special treat another time." David stepped in then, trying to smooth things over. "How about we have both? A cupcake now and a slice of Grandma's delicious cake later." But the damage was done. Leo had a mini tantrum. He wanted the fire truck cake. Chloe had to pick him up and carry him wailing into another room. The other children ate their perfect cupcakes in silence. I stood there by my lopsided cake, feeling like a foolish old woman who didn't know the rules of her own family's world. When Chloe came back out, Leo was calmer, but her smile was gone. She didn't look at me for the rest of the party. That evening, after the guests had left, I was in the kitchen wrapping up the uneaten fire truck cake. Chloe came in. "Martha, we need to be a united front," she said without preamble. "When we say something to Leo, it has to be final. You can't undermine us like that." I was stunned. "Undermine you? I didn't say a word, Chloe. He asked for the cake. I didn't encourage him." "Your presence encourages him. He knows you're the soft touch. He knows he can play us against each other. He's 4, but he's smart. We can't have that." "I would never try to turn him against you," I said, and my voice trembled. "You're his mother." "I know, but you have to trust our judgment, even when you don't agree with it." She left the kitchen then, leaving me alone with the sad, lopsided cake. I looked at it, the red icing now looking more like a wound. I had only wanted to bring joy, but in her eyes, I had brought conflict. That was the first time I felt like a guest in their lives. An awkward, slightly inconvenient guest. The incidents were small after that, but they started to pile up like stones, building a wall between us. There was the time I bought Leo a brightly colored plastic toy from the grocery store. It was cheap and noisy, and he loved it. Chloe took one look at it and said, "Martha, we're trying to avoid overstimulating plastic. We prefer natural materials for his sensory development." She let him play with it for that afternoon, but the next time I came over, it was gone. There was the time I told him a silly, made-up story about a talking squirrel who lived in our backyard. He was enthralled. For weeks, he'd asked to go look for the squirrel. Chloe pulled me aside one day. "He's starting to have trouble distinguishing fantasy from reality at school. Maybe we could stick to the facts for a while." Each time, I felt a little piece of my role being chipped away. I wasn't allowed to be the source of treats or fun toys or magical stories. What was left for me? What was my purpose? I tried to talk to David about it. He was always so busy, rushing between work and home. He'd become quieter, more withdrawn. When I brought it up, he just sighed. "Mom, Chloe is just very passionate about parenting. She reads all the books, all the studies. She wants what's best for Leo. Try not to take it personally. But it was personal. How could it not be? It was my love that was being questioned, my way of loving. I started to second-guess everything. Would she disapprove of this shirt? Would she mind if I gave him this cracker? I became nervous around my own grandson, hyper-aware of every word, every action. The easy, joyful rhythm of our afternoons was gone, replaced by a constant, low hum of anxiety. The final stone on the pile, the one that made the wall insurmountable, was the Christmas photo. Chloe had arranged for a professional photographer to take family pictures for their Christmas card. It was a big production. They had matching outfits, white sweaters, and denim. They looked like a perfect family from a magazine. The photographer was snapping away, David, Chloe, and Leo on the sofa, smiling. Then Chloe called me over. "Martha, come on, let's get one with you." I was so touched. I hurried over and sat next to David, putting my arm around Leo. We smiled. The photographer took a few shots. A week later, the Christmas cards arrived at my house. I opened the envelope with such excitement. There they were, my beautiful family. David, Chloe, and Leo, looking perfect. And on the back, in elegant script, it said, "Wishing you peace and joy this holiday season. Love, David, Chloe, and Leo." I wasn't in the picture. They had cropped me out. I sat at this very kitchen table, holding that card, and I cried. It was a small thing, just a photo, but it felt like a message, a clear, unmistakable message. You are not part of this picture. You are not part of this family. I should have said something then. I should have talked to David. But I was tired. I was so tired of feeling like I was always causing problems. So I swallowed the hurt. I put the Christmas card on the mantelpiece, and I tried to forget the empty space where I was supposed to be. I now know that was my mistake. Silence never makes things better. It only gives the hurt a quiet place to grow. And oh, how it grew. The winter turned to spring. The tension in the air was so thick you could almost see it. My afternoons with Leo continued, but they were shadowed. I was like a mouse tiptoeing around, afraid to make a sound, afraid to break one of the unspoken, ever-changing rules. David became more and more distant. He'd drop Leo off and pick him up, but he rarely came inside. He'd just honk the horn from the driveway. When I did see him, he looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes. I asked him if he was okay, if he and Chloe were all right. "We're fine, Mom," he'd say, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Just busy, you know how it is." I did know, but I also knew my son. Something was wrong. I felt it in my bones. One afternoon in early May, Leo was playing in the backyard while I weeded the flower beds. He was chattering away about a little girl at school named Lily. He said they were going to get married and live in a castle. I laughed. "That sounds wonderful, my love." He stopped digging and looked at me, his small face suddenly serious. "Gaga, are you and Mommy mad at each other?" The question hit me like a physical blow. "What? No, sweetheart, of course not. Why would you think that?" He shrugged his little shoulders. "I heard Mommy talking to Daddy. She was using her loud voice. She said your name. She said you were a bad influence." He stumbled over the words, not understanding their meaning, but perfectly mimicking Chloe's tone. A cold dread washed over me. A bad influence? Is that what she thought of me? "Gaga loves your Mommy and Daddy very much, and we all love you more than anything in the whole world. Sometimes grown-ups just disagree, but it doesn't change the love." He seemed satisfied with that and went back to digging, but I couldn't. The words,
bad influence echoed in my mind. What had I done? Loved him too much? Given him too many hugs? Too many cookies? That was the first time I felt a flicker of anger, a small, hot flame deep in my chest. How dare she? How dare she poison this pure and beautiful bond with her judgment and her coldness? But the flame died as quickly as it came, doused by a flood of fear. If I said anything, if I confronted her, I might lose him. So I did nothing. I chose silence. Again. The turning point, the moment the levee broke, happened on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday.
Leo had a slight fever. Nothing serious, just a sniffle and a warm forehead. His preschool had called Chloe, and she had a big meeting she couldn't miss, so she called me. "Martha, can you pick up Leo? He's not well. I'll come get him from your house as soon as I can." "Of course," I said, my grandmotherly instincts kicking in immediately. "I'll take good care of him." I picked him up. He was listless and clingy. I brought him home, gave him some children's Tylenol, made him my special get-well toast. Just cinnamon toast, really, but it had always worked for David. I tucked him up on the sofa with a blanket, put on his favorite quiet cartoon, and he fell asleep, his head in my lap. I sat there for hours, just stroking his hair, watching his chest rise and fall. There is no peace quite like the peace of caring for a sleeping child. All the worry, the tension, it all melted away. It was just me and my grandson, the way it was meant to be. Chloe arrived just after 6. She burst through the front door, her face a mask of panic. "Where is he? How is he?" she demanded, her voice shrill. "Shh," I said softly, pointing to the sleeping boy in my lap. "He's fine. He's sleeping. His fever broke about an hour ago." She rushed over and knelt beside the sofa, pressing her hand to his forehead. She looked at the empty medicine cup on the coffee table. "What did you give him?" "Just the Tylenol you had in his bag, and some toast. He kept it down. He's been sleeping peacefully." She looked from the TV to the blanket to the empty toast plate. Her eyes narrowed. "You gave him medicine? Were you following the exact dosage? Did you use the syringe? And toast? What kind of toast? Was it whole grain? And cartoons? Screen time is the worst thing for a fever, Martha. It overstimulates their brain when it needs to rest." Her words were a rapid-fire assault. I was too stunned to speak. "Chloe," I finally whispered, trying to keep my voice calm for Leo's sake. "He's okay. I've taken care of a sick child before." "That's the problem," she snapped, her voice rising. Leo stirred in his sleep. "You think you know everything because you raised a child 30 years ago. Things have changed. There are new guidelines, new research. You can't just do things the old-fashioned way and hope for the best. This is my son. My son." Her words hung in the air, sharp and cruel. My son. Not ours. Not our grandson. My son. The last thread of my composure snapped. "He is my grandson," I said, my voice trembling with an anger I didn't know I possessed. "And I love him. I would never, ever do anything to harm him. All I have ever done is love him. Your kind of love is smothering him. It's holding him back. It's filling him with sugar and nonsense and keeping him from becoming the person he's meant to be." We were both standing now, facing each other over my sleeping grandson. The air crackled with years of suppressed resentment and hurt. "What is it you want from me, Chloe?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Do you want me to disappear? Is that it?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me, her chest heaving. And in her eyes, I saw the truth. The answer was yes. She bent down and gently scooped up Leo. He whimpered, waking up confused. "It's okay, baby," she cooed to him. "Mommy's here. We're going home." She didn't look at me again. She walked out of my house, carrying my grandson, and closed the door behind her with a soft, final click. I stood alone in the middle of the living room. The silence was deafening. The only evidence that Leo had been there was a small, crumpled piece of cinnamon toast on a plate. I sank to the floor, right there on the rug, and I wept. I wept for the little boy who was being taken from me. I wept for the son who was too distant to see what was happening. I wept for myself, for the love that had become a crime. The war was over, and I had lost. The days after the fight were the quietest of my life. The phone didn't ring, David didn't come by. There were no little steps, no joyful shouts of Gaga. The house was just a house again, empty, full of echoes. I was adrift in a sea of my own grief. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I would wander from room to room, touching the things Leo had left behind. A stray Lego under the sofa, a forgotten picture he'd drawn stuck to the refrigerator. Each one was a little knife twisting in my heart. A week passed. Then on a Thursday, David finally came over. Alone. He looked awful. Pale, exhausted. He stood in the doorway as if he were a salesman, not my son. "Can I come in, Mom?" he asked. "Of course," I said, my heart aching at the formality. He came in and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where we'd shared 1,000 meals. He couldn't look at me. "Chloe told me about the argument," he began, his voice flat. "It wasn't just an argument, David," I said softly. "She said terrible things." He ran a hand through his hair. She's under a lot of pressure, Mom. At work, with Leo. She has a very specific vision for how she wants things to be. And I don't fit into that vision, do I? I asked, the pain raw in my voice. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of such misery. "It's not that simple." "It feels very simple to me," I whispered. "She doesn't want me in Leo's life." "That's not true," he said, but it lacked conviction. He sighed, a heavy, world-weary sound. "She thinks, we both think, that we need to establish clearer boundaries for Leo's stability." "Boundaries," I repeated the word. It was such a cold, clinical word for the act of cutting a grandmother out of her grandson's life. "We've found a new school for him," David said, staring at his hands. "It's a great school. It has an extended day program, so he won't need to be picked up in the afternoons anymore." There it was, the official decree, delivered not by Chloe, but by my own son, my own flesh and blood. I looked at him, this man I had raised, whom I had loved with every fiber of my being. I saw the little boy who had scraped his knee and run to me for a bandage. I saw the teenager who had trusted me with his secret fears. And now he was sitting here, calmly dismantling my world. "David," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "look at me. Do you believe this? Do you honestly believe that my love for Leo is harmful?" His shoulders slumped. He looked defeated. "Mom, it doesn't matter what I believe. This is what's happening. This is what we've decided. As a family." As a family. The words were a final, brutal blow. I was no longer part of that unit. I was an outsider, a problem to be managed. "So that's it?" I asked, the tears starting to fall. "I get no say? After all these years of love and support, I just disappear?" "It's not disappearing," he said, but he couldn't hold my gaze. "It's just a change. We'll still see you for holidays, birthdays." Holidays, birthdays, condensed, supervised visits.
I was being demoted from a daily presence to a seasonal event. I didn't have the strength to fight anymore. The anger had burned out, leaving only a vast, hollow sadness. "Okay, David," I said, my voice empty. "If that's what you want." He stood up, looking relieved that the conversation was over, relieved that I hadn't put up more of a fight. He leaned down and gave me a quick, awkward hug. "I love you, Mom," he mumbled into my shoulder. I wanted to say it back, but the words stuck in my throat. I just nodded. And then he was gone. I sat at the table for a long, long time. The sun set, and the room grew dark. I didn't bother to turn on the lights. I just sat there, in the gathering darkness, and let the reality of my new life settle over me. I was alone. The next few months were a blur of gray days. I went through the motions. I grocery shopped, I paid my bills, I tended my garden. But the color had drained out of everything. The flowers didn't seem as bright. The food had no taste. I missed Leo with a physical ache that never went away. I would see a little boy with blonde hair in the supermarket, and my heart would leap before crashing back down when it wasn't him. I would wake up in the morning, and for a single beautiful second, I would forget, and then I would remember, and the pain would feel fresh and new. I tried to call a few times. Chloe always answered. Her voice was polite but icy. "He's busy right now, Martha. He's napping. We're just about to head out." I stopped calling. My friends would ask about him. "How's that adorable grandson of yours?" I would force a smile and say, "He's great, just great." And then I'd quickly change the subject. The truth was too heavy to share.
I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller, quieter. The world felt too big and too loud without him in it. I was a boat that had lost its anchor, drifting further and further out to sea. The seasons turned. The vibrant greens of summer faded into the fiery reds and golds of autumn. My garden, once my pride and joy, became overgrown. I didn't have the heart to tend to it. What was the point? One crisp October morning, I was dragging my recycling bin to the curb when I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, from across the street. She was a widow like me, but we'd never been more than nodding acquaintances. She was tending to her own magnificent chrysanthemums. She saw me and waved. I gave a weak wave back and turned to go inside. "Martha!" she called out. I stopped, surprised. I don't think she'd ever called me by my name before. She walked across the street, wiping her hands on her gardening apron. "I haven't seen your little shadow in a while," she said kindly. "Is your grandson okay?" That simple, caring question was my undoing. The wall I had built around my heart crumbled. Right there, on the sidewalk, I started to cry. Quiet, helpless tears that I couldn't stop. Mrs. Gable, whose first name I learned was Eleanor, didn't say a word. She just put her arm around my shoulders and led me into my own house. She sat me down at the kitchen table, put the kettle on, and made us both a cup of tea. And then I told her everything. The whole sad story. The slow erosion, the fight, the betrayal, the silence. It all came pouring out. She listened. She didn't offer advice. She didn't tell me to cheer up. She just listened. And when I was finished, she placed her wrinkled hand over mine. "Oh, my dear," she said softly, "the deepest cuts are always from our own family." Her empathy was a balm. It didn't fix anything, but it made the loneliness feel a little less absolute. Eleanor started coming over once a week for tea. We'd talk about our gardens, about books, about our lives. She had a son who lived across the country whom she rarely saw. She understood loss. She understood the quiet grief of an empty house. Through her, I slowly started to reconnect with the world. She dragged me to a community gardening club. I started tending my flower beds again, pulling out the weeds one by one. It was hard, physical work, and it felt good. It felt like I was clearing out the weeds in my own soul, too. I wasn't healing, not really. The wound was still there, raw and open, but I was learning to live with it. I was learning to breathe around the pain. The true turning point, the moment of realization, came on a cold, clear night in December. I was wrapping a few small Christmas presents for David, Chloe, and Leo. I had bought Leo a simple wooden toy train. No plastic, no loud noises. I had been so careful in my choice, trying to preempt any criticism. I held the train in my hands, and I thought about the lopsided fire truck cake. I thought about the joy I had felt making it, the pure, uncalculated love that had gone into it. And I thought about the perfect, sugar-free cupcakes, devoid of joy, full of control. And in that moment, I saw everything with a terrible, painful clarity. This was never about the sugar. It was never about the cartoons or the plastic toys. It was about Chloe's own fears, her need for control in a world that must have felt chaotic to her. My simple, messy, emotional love was a variable she couldn't control. It didn't fit into her spreadsheet for a perfect life. I was a reminder of a world that wasn't curated, sanitized, and optimized. And David, my David, he wasn't choosing her over me. He was choosing peace. He was the little boy caught between two parents, trying to make everyone happy, and in the process, breaking his own heart and mine. The anger I had been clinging to for months finally dissolved. It didn't turn to forgiveness, not yet, but it turned to understanding, a deep, sorrowful understanding. They weren't monsters. They were just lost in their own ideas of what a family should be, and blind to the beautiful, imperfect family they already had. I still wrapped the train and put it under my small, lonely Christmas tree, but I did it without resentment. I did it with love that was no longer desperate for approval. It was just love, pure and simple. I had spent a year believing they had stolen my grandson from me, but that night, I realized I had given him away. I had given him away piece by piece, every time I stayed silent, every time I apologized for my love, every time I made myself smaller to fit into their world. I had to stop, for my own sake and for Leo's. He deserved a grandmother who loved him boldly and unapologetically, not a shadow who tiptoed in the corners of his life. The path forward was still unclear, but for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of strength, a quiet resolve. The storm wasn't over, but I was finally learning to stand in the rain. Spring came again, the world was reborn, and so, it seemed, was I. I didn't make any grand gestures. I didn't show up on their doorstep demanding to see Leo. That wasn't my way. Instead, I started to live again, truly live. I poured my love into my garden, and it bloomed more beautifully than ever before. I had coffee with Eleanor. I even joined a book club at the local library. I was building a life that wasn't entirely dependent on being Gaga. It was a life for Martha. I never stopped thinking about Leo. I thought about him every day. But the thoughts were no longer just sharp, painful stabs of loss. They were wrapped in a softer, more enduring love. A love that could exist, even from a distance. I started writing him letters, not to send, but for myself. I wrote down all my memories of our afternoons together, the time we saw the rainbow after the storm, the way he laughed when I blew raspberries on his tummy, the sound of his voice saying Gaga. I poured all my love onto those pages, creating a record of our time together so that he would always know, somehow, how deeply he was loved. On a warm afternoon in May, almost a full year after the day, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. I put down my trowel, wiped my hands on my pants, and walked to the front door. When I opened it, I froze. It was David, and he was alone. He looked different. The tiredness was still there, but the tension in his shoulders was gone. He looked more like the boy I remembered. "Hi, Mom," he said, and his voice was soft, hesitant. "David, come in, please." He stepped inside. He looked around the living room as if seeing it for the first time. His eyes lingered on the new photos I had put up, old ones of him as a boy, and a few of Leo that I couldn't bear to take down. "The garden looks amazing," he said. "Thank you. I've been spending a lot of time there." There was a long, heavy silence. We stood in the middle of the room, two strangers who used to know each other's hearts by memory. "Mom," he began, his voice thick with emotion. I am so sorry." The words hung in the air, simple, direct, and utterly shattering. I didn't say anything. I just waited. He ran a hand over his face. "This last year, I've been a coward. I let you down. I let Leo down. I was so caught up in trying to keep the peace and trying to make everything perfect that I lost sight of what actually matters." Tears were streaming down his face now. My strong, quiet son, crying in my living room. "Chloe and we've been in counseling for months. It's been hard, really hard. We're still figuring things out. But one of the things I figured out is that I was wrong. So wrong. About everything. Your love for Leo wasn't a problem. It was a gift. The greatest gift he could have. And I was too blind to see it." He finally looked at me, his eyes begging for forgiveness. "I miss you, Mom. Leo misses you. He asks for you all the time. We told him you were on a long trip, but he knows. I think he knows." Hearing that Leo missed me was like feeling the sun on my skin after a long, cold winter. The warmth spread through my entire body. I walked over to him and took his hands in mine. They were the same hands I had held when he learned to walk. "I missed you too, David," I said, my own tears falling freely. "Every single day." We stood there for a long time, just holding each other and crying. Crying for the lost year, crying for the pain we had caused each other, crying for the chance, however fragile, to start again. He didn't stay long that day. It was a beginning, not an ending, but it was a beginning built on truth, not on silence. A week later, the doorbell rang again. This time, when I opened it, David was there, and beside him, holding his hand, was Leo. He was taller. His face had lost some of its baby roundness, but his eyes were the same. David's eyes. My eyes. He looked up at me, a little shy, a little uncertain. "Leo," David said softly, "look who it is." Leo's gaze met mine, and then a slow, beautiful smile spread across his face. "Gaga," he whispered. And then he let go of David's hand and ran into my arms. I knelt down and caught him, holding him so tightly I thought my heart would burst. I breathed in his little boy smell, sunshine and grass and innocence. He wrapped his small arms around my neck and buried his face in my shoulder. "I missed you, Gaga," he mumbled into my neck. I held him, this precious, stolen treasure, now returned to me. I looked over his shoulder at David, who was watching me with tears in his eyes.
He gave me a small, grateful nod. He wasn't fully back. Chloe wasn't there. The road to full healing would be long and likely have many bumps. There would be conversations, boundaries to respectfully navigate, and trust to slowly rebuild. But in that moment, holding my grandson in my arms, feeling the solid, forgiving presence of my son, none of that mattered. The sun hadn't been stolen forever. It had just been hidden behind the clouds for a while, and now it was shining again. So that's my story. It's a story of a deep hurt, a year of silence, and a fragile, hopeful new beginning. If there's a lesson in all of this, I think it's this. Love should never be something you have to apologize for. It should never be made small to fit into someone else's perfect picture. True love is messy. It's lopsided cakes and noisy plastic toys. It's getting your hands dirty in the garden of someone's life. And silence is the real thief. It steals your voice, your joy, and your truth. If I had spoken up sooner, from a place of love rather than fear, perhaps the wall wouldn't have gotten so high. My family is not perfect now. We are a mended vase, the cracks still visible if you look closely. But the cracks are where the light gets in. They are a reminder of what we almost lost and what we were lucky enough to find again. Leo is here with me now as I finish telling you this. He's playing in the garden with his wooden train, the one I bought him last Christmas. He's making it chug along the edge of a flower bed, his imagination turning my simple backyard into a great wide world. And I am just sitting here on my porch, watching him. My heart is full. Not perfectly, not without its scars, but full. He just looked up and saw me watching him. He smiled, a gap-toothed, glorious smile, and waved. "I love you, Gaga." "I love you more, my sunshine," I whispered back. And in this moment, that is enough. It is more than enough.